Hi, my name is Bart.
My name is Lewis. We are two pilots with a passion for history.
Welcome to our channel, High on History.
Welcome to a special episode of High on History. Today we are in the Africa Museum in Tervuren.
That's right. And we're going to interview Professor Benoît Henriët from the VUB, the University of Brussels. And we're going to discuss a period in the history of Congo and Belgium that recently has become a point of discussion in our society.
In the media, we have seen reports of scandalized statues of King Leopold II and other important figures during the Congolese colonial period. We have seen racial police violence in the United States and the start of the Black Lives Matter movement. We find it important to bring our viewers an academic point of view into the history, the difficult history between Belgium and Congo.
Yes, there's a strong link between Congo and Brussels. For example, you have the Matongé district. And many people from Brussels agree that the Brussels of today would not have existed without the influence of Congo. Many Congolese and many Belgians have questions about this shared history, and it is our mission today to figure this out. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, welcome to High on History. Today we are in the Museum of Central Africa in Tervuren to discuss a recent and also controversial chapter in the history of Belgium. We have contacted Professor Henriët because of his expertise in this field, and we would like to get with this interview a deeper understanding of this period. So Professor Henriët, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Benoît Henriët. I'm Professor of Contemporary History at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels, and I specialize in the history of colonial Central Africa.
My first question for you is, how was Congo discovered?
Well, Congo was not actually discovered because the people who lived in the Congo basin were very much aware of their own existence. But the first contacts between people from Western Europe and people from Central Africa started in the late 15th century through the voyage of Portuguese merchants and seamen. And the Congo was, for many centuries, one of the most important export places for enslaved people who were sent to the plantations of North and South and Central America.
Okay, so how and why did King Leopold II acquire a land that approximately 87 times the size of Belgium? So how did that happen?
What happened is that the colonization of Central Africa happened during a huge wave of colonial expansion of Western Europe. So it was difficult, and there was no reason, or not that many reasons, for people from Western Europe, for instance, to travel further inland than the mouth of the Congo River up until the late 19th century, where technological improvements and the needs of global capitalism made it important. And what happened is that a lot of different European empires were trying to settle, to expand themselves in Central Africa. But Central Africa was extremely poorly known at that time. For instance, we had better maps of the North and South Pole than of the Congo Basin in the late 19th century. And the fact was that the European powers were not very much aware of the sort of riches that could be found in Central Africa, and so were kind of reluctant to colonize this place themselves, but they also didn't want to see it fall into the hands of their colonial competitors. So King Leopold II and his men, his helpers, found some sort of suggested a sort of win-win situation to the other European powers during the Conference of Berlin in 1884-1885, which was to say, we will shoulder the cost of colonization and we will open this new Congo Free State to business. Everybody will be welcome to do business there. So it was indeed sort of win-win situation where, in principle, the idea was that all kind of merchants from every country could come to Congo to do business, but at the same time, no colonial power would have to pay for the cost of colonization.
How did the Congolese react to the role of King Leopold II, and why is there so much controversy around the subject?
It's difficult to say how the Congolese did react to Leopold II as a ruler. Leopold II never set foot in Congo, but for certain is that it was extremely important for the king and for his men to make sure that the Congo would become profitable as fast and as much as possible. And it was very difficult in the first decennia of the existence of the Congo Free State, which was the primary colony of Leopold II, because, for instance, resources in ivory were not enough to cover the very expensive cost of developing colonial infrastructures, for instance. And everything changed around the beginning of the 20th century when there was a growing demand on global markets for rubber, and the Congolese rainforest developed a lot of rubber. So the idea is that rubber would make Congo profitable. And it would make Congo profitable at any possible cost. So people working for private people working for the Congo Free State were given the same instructions. They had to produce as much rubber as possible. But the production of rubber was both dangerous. It had to happen in very unhealthy situations, far away from the villages where people lived. People were reluctant to work for to go collect rubber by themselves. So it had to be constrained to do so. And there was a vast array of different forms of violence that were used by the agents of the state, by the agents of private companies active in the Congo Free State in order to coerce the local populations into the rubber production. For instance, through the burning of villages, the rape of women, the exaction of physical punishment for those who refused to do it. And all these exactions left profound traces and profound traumas in the Congolese population.
Okay, and then why did King Leopold II, cede the Congo Free State to Belgian state actually?
What happened is that from the late 19th century, the rumors that circulated among the colonial circles in Europe about the violence that was exerted on the Congo Free State started to become more and more public. First, with the first report that was written by the British Consul in the Congo Free State, which created a lot of press. Second, by photographs and reports that were gathered by Protestant missionaries in the Congo, which were also spread in the press. And these scandals forced the king to set up a parliamentary inquiry commission, which was sent to Congo in 1905, which was supposed to nuance to counter the claims of extreme violence in the Congo Free State, but which finally ended up confirming what the rumors said. And when the king faced all these allegations and the very public and global scandal, the Congo Free State had no other choice than to relinquish its colony to Belgium in 1908.
Did the Belgian state then afterwards take a different approach than King Leopold II? And were there any differences for the Congolese people? And also, was there any parliamentary representation for the Congolese in Belgium?
So that's a very interesting question, because what happens is that up until the very last years of colonization, there never ever saw any kind of elections that were organized. So the Congolese never sent, for instance, members of parliament to Brussels, to the contrary to what could happen in certain circumstances in some French colonies, for instance, and this in clear. So there was a sort of parliamentary oversight, but no parliamentary participation of the Congolese to the Belgian political decision-making process. First thing. Second, Belgian colonization lasted for 52 years, and so therefore there was some, changes along those decennia. But in the very beginning of colonization, we can say up until the First World War, basically the system of the Congo Free States remained more or less the same. Was the same agents. In many cases just remained in place. For instance, after the end of the First World War, the effective control of the Belgian state over Congo started to become more and more present, more and more active, but at the same time, forced labor kept on existing, even though it was illegal. A lot of violence was exerted. The Belgian colonial authorities never did anything in order to ease the emergence of the local elites. So there were many continuities between the Free State and Belgian Congo, and we should never forget also that colonization is the exercise of a racist form of violence, and that therefore colonization as a power structure is systematically deeply linked with discrimination and racial segregation.
So yeah, bringing me to the next question, how did the local population experience the Belgian? Were there differences in working conditions, more or less answered already? And did they also hold on to their tribe customs, or did they actually change into a Western way of life?
Traditions are always fluctuating. So this is something that's very important for historians, is just to say that it's nothing, tradition is something that is fluid, it keeps on changing, which keeps on being adapted to new circumstances, new situations, new givens. And so therefore, there was, at the same time, people who were kind of constrained to start working into globalized capitalist wage economy, but it doesn't mean, of course, that all sorts of uses, beliefs, ceremonies were relinquished. And we also have to make a difference between what happened, for instance, in cities, which experienced, because Congo experienced an urban boom from in the post-war era, for instance, where people garnered some new ways of life, new uses, new habits, new consumption patterns, as it happens all over the world, with urbanization. While maybe in the rural areas, the contact with colonial actors and institutions was more far and wide, and created a situation where acculturation went maybe on a slower pace.
What was the contribution of the Congolese Free State or the Congolese colony during the First and the Second World War?
Okay. During the First World War, Congolese soldiers were sent to fight in German East Africa and actually managed to achieve one of a few victories of Belgian armies there when they captured the city of colonial outpost of Tabora, which therefore also made it possible for Belgium to claim control over the Mandate territories of Rwanda and Burundi. And during the Second World War, Congolese soldiers were sent out to fight on different battlefields in Africa, but also they were sent also as medical officers in Burma. But the most important contribution of Congo to the war effort was actually that Congo delivered the uranium that was necessary for the Manhattan Project. So for the creation of the atomic bombs, which would fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. And these bombs it was only possible to make these bombs with the Congolese uranium because it was the only one who was potent enough, therefore. And it's also very important to remember that there was very little recognition given to Congolese soldiers, the Congolese war veterans after the war, and that their contribution to the war efforts didn't change the structural racism of the force publique. And in World War I and World War II, the colonial army refused, and the colonial administration refused to send Congolese soldiers to fight in Europe because they thought and feared that seeing white people fighting each other would hamper the so-called racial prestige of the European.
It's often said that the colony or the Free State was an economic miracle from Belgium. Is there any truth to this?
It's very difficult to evaluate, of course, what's the economic weight of colonization, of benefit of colonization could be, because it depends from the actors that you would have to look at. What is certain is that it greatly contributed to the development, for instance, of the mining industry in Belgium, metallurgy in Belgium. It greatly contributed to the wealth of the Société Générale, for instance, which was really one of the most important actors in the Belgian economic history. It allowed also Belgium to punch above its weight in terms of geopolitical influence. And it's allowed, of course, as well to free up funds for different projects in the embellishment of Belgian cities.
Why was Congo so important for the history of Brussels? What can tourists still see today?
Okay. I think it's very important because Brussels as a colonial metropolis, it was very important for public actors to mark as well the fact that Brussels was not only the capital of Belgium as such, but also of the Belgian Empire. So during the Congo Free State era, a lot of the money that was garnered by the Red Rubber contributed to the building of some prestige projects in Brussels, such as the Cinquantenaire, for instance, or the Territorial Museum, which we are now sitting. You can also find many traces in the form of statues that were built in order to celebrate, for instance, the so-called sacrifice of the pioneers of colonization, statues that were made with African/Congolese themes in order to really mark in the public space the fact that Brussels was a colonial capital. And you can also find a lot of street names related to Congolese history. The thing is that, of course, these traces are now very controversial, and it fosters a very exciting public debate about what we should do with the traces of this very complex event.
Why did Congo as a colony ended so abruptly, and when?
Okay, so Congo got its independence on the 30th of June 1960. And that dates to a huge wave of decolonization and independence all over Africa. But Belgium was really not prepared for decolonization, even though it became more and more obvious in the 1950s that it would become inevitable in the near future. There was also the cautionary tale of the Algerian War of Independence, which was clearly not the way to go, not only for Belgium, but for other colonial empires. So what happened is that riots happened in Leopoldville, today's Kinshasa, in the capital of Belgian Congo, in January 1959. And from that point onwards, in order to avoid the degeneration of decolonization into a protracted conflict, the Belgian authorities decided to engage to pave the way for an accelerated decolonization process. But the problem was that Belgian authorities never supported the idea that local elite should be supported, to the contrary of what happened, for instance, in many other French and British colonies. So there was a very limited local elite, and everything had to go very fast. It took less than 2 years before the Congo became fully independent. The political side of the independence was quite quickly settled between Congolese politicians and representatives of the Belgian state, but they never agreed on the economic side of the situation. That is also very interesting because it's something that we can observe not only in the context of Congo, but in the context of decolonization in general. Former colonial empires were easily convinced that they could relinquish political sovereignty, but at the same time, they still wanted to keep the economic interests in the colonies.
What were the consequences of independence for the Congolese people?
The consequences were mostly it was extremely difficult. The decolonization was very hectic, very chaotic, because just after 10 days of independence, there was a mutiny in the Force Publique. Because Congolese soldiers were frustrated with the fact that they could not get to the higher ranks of the army. There were a lot of tensions between the Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, and the President, Joseph Kabila. The Belgian authorities kept on wanting to intervene into Congolese political affairs. Katanga seceded from Congo with the support, silent support of Belgium. With active support of Belgium, so there were a lot of things going on at the same time, and it was a consequence of how poorly planned decolonization was.
How should we, as Belgians and the Congolese, actually look back to these periods?
I think that the most important element for us is to always keep in mind the fact that colonization is intrinsically racist. It's a racist power structure. So we should avoid to try thinking about colonization as a sort of an experience that was maybe painful, but which had some positive aspects. It's very difficult to consider that something was so intrinsically racist and violent could have a positive aspect. I think that today it's important for Belgians and Congolese to try to learn as much as they can on this shared painful and violent history, and try to see how we can move onwards and how we can further collaborate.
To bring it to the last question, what's the relationship today between Belgium and Congo? I know there's a visit going on today, actually, from the royals from Belgium.
In the last couple of years, there were a lot of efforts that were made by Belgian public figures, by the government, by the royal palace, in order to atone for the violence of colonization. And today is actually a very important, even maybe an historic day, because today King Philip is going to pronounce a speech in the Congolese parliament, which will inevitably be seen as an answer to the speech that his great uncle made on the day of the independence, 7th of June 1960, which was and still remains very controversial because it was completely apologetic about colonization. And it was the answer to this speech that was given by Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, which remains today seen as one of the most powerful indictments of colonization as an oppressive power structure.
Congolais et Congolaises, combattants de l'indépendance, aujourd'hui victorieux, je vous salue au nom du gouvernement congolais. À vous tous, mes amis, qui avez lutté sans relâche à nos côtés, je vous demande de faire de ce 30 juillet 1960 une date illustre que vous garderez ineffaçablement gravée dans vos cœurs. Nous avons connu les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir parce que nous étions des nègres. Nous avons connu que la loi n'était jamais la même, selon qu'il s'agissait d'un blanc ou d'un noir, accommodante pour les uns, cruelle et inhumaine pour les autres. Nous avons connu les souffrances atroces. Nous avons connu qu'il y avait dans les villes des maisons magnifiques pour les blancs et des paillotes croulantes pour les noirs. Que les noirs n'étaient admis dans les cinémas, ni dans les restaurants, ni dans les magasins européens. Que les noirs voyageaient à même la coque de péniche au pied du blanc dans sa cabine de luxe. Qui oubliera enfin les fusillades où périt tant de nos frères. Les cachons furent brutalement jetés, ceux qui ne voulaient plus se soumettre au régime d'injustice, d'oppression et d'exploitation. L'indépendance du Congo marque un pas décisif vers la libération de tous les continents africains. Voilà, si, Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, chers compatriotes, mes frères de race, mes frères de lutte, ce que j'ai voulu vous dire au nom du gouvernement en ce jour magnifique de notre indépendance complète et souveraine. Hommage aux combattants de la liberté nationale. Vive l'indépendance et l'unité africaine. Vive les Congo indépendants et souverains.
And so the speech of King Philip today is going to be a sort of answer, correction of the course, a very important moment in symbolic moment, which might change the relation between the former metropolis and the former colony, and which hopefully will lead to more honest perspective on Belgian side, on what happened.
Le régime colonial, comme tel, était basé sur l'exploitation et la domination. Ce régime était celui d'une relation inégale, en soi injustifiable, marquée par le paternalisme, les discriminations et le racisme. Il a donné lieu à des exactions et des humiliations. Je désire réaffirmer mes plus profonds regrets pour ces blessures du passé.
So, Professor Henriët, we had one more question. Have you ever visited Congo, and what is your personal experience taking away from the state, from the country, from the people?
Yeah, I've been to Congo many times. I've done extensive research there, and Congo is really fascinating, mostly because it's extremely diverse. Sometimes it's the idea that, Africa is just like a big country, but actually, when you look at the Congo Basin, it's the second most biodiverse place on Earth. There are many different communities in Congo, many different languages, many different cultures. And I think that's really trying to show how Congo, how diverse Congo is, and how Congolese really partook to their own, the determination of their own historical dynamics is very important. That's the most important part of my job, I think, is to think about colonization not only as a European power structure, but as something that against what Congolese really tried to fight against, to struggle against, to counter, to avoid, to sabotage from the inside.
So you would recommend people visiting Congo? And
of course, yeah, absolutely. And there's so many wonderful things and wonderful places to visit, and so many places that I would like to see, for instance.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Nice.
Voilà, faut pas avoir peur de laisser un petit commentaire hein, sur les vidéos. À quoi ça sert, comment je fais tout ça. Ben de lourrique, bande de fainéants, un petit commentaire, c'est bien, c'est pas bien, je m'en fous, faire me kluten nun, de duivel, n'importe quoi quand même.